Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. I legitimately had no idea that Fabio Junio was qualified for this year's Olympia. I saw him come second at the Dubai Pro to Terrence, beating Wesley Vissers by the way, and I thought that that was the only show he did this year and just assumed he wouldn't be at the Olympia. However, I was trying to make my classic predictions for this year and I saw Fabio on the competitors list and immediately I had someone else in my top 10. This guy is seriously good and this is going to be his first Olympia. From other people's predictions, at least the ones I've seen so far, they typically put Fabio in the top 10 to 6 range, and rightfully so. He beat Wesley Vissers at the Dubai Pro, an improved Wesley Vissers, and Wesley placed 8th last year, so Fabio should be in the conversation for at minimum top 10. And that's what I want to do today. I want to see how Fabio would stack up against other top 10 guys. Who better to start with than the actual 10th place from last year, the Saharan Eagle, Michael DeBole. Michael is slept on in my opinion. He's been racking up wins and high placings. Just this year, he won both the Pittsburgh and New York Pros, and like I said, has placed top 10 in the world as recently as last year. Now, I do understand Wesley placed higher than Michael last year, and Fabio beat Wesley, so this should be a done deal, right? Well, not exactly. Firstly, I asked you guys how you felt about these two athletes going head-to-head, and more than the majority of you had Michael placing ahead of Fabio. That on paper doesn't make sense, because on that same paper, Fabio should be placing higher than both of them, Wesley and Michael. So not only do you guys have Fabio placing behind Michael, which makes for an interesting comparison, especially if I disagree with you guys, but secondly, I think these guys stack up pretty well. Both of these guys aren't that classic. I'll be upfront with that, especially Fabio. I think he's insanely muscular for this division, and Michael is also really muscular with some insane conditioning, but both guys just don't have the most classic lines. Both guys have some great classic elements and are good at posing, sure, but really they're both filling the same niche of not so classic guys. So with all that in mind, I think this is going to be a half decent comparison. Let's see how Fabio stacks up against last year's 10th place spot and go ahead and jump into this comparison. And if you guys like this comparison, go ahead and like the video and subscribe for more. Now, I did say both guys aren't the most classic individuals, but for this pose, at least in my opinion, usually the most classic guys win. Even in the open division, I look at two key areas. The arms, obviously, and then the outline and athlete cuts, which is a huge aesthetic component. In terms of that outline, I prefer Michael. I think his balance between upper and lower body allows for a much cleaner silhouette. As we'll come to find, Fabio needs to bring his legs up a little bit. They're the weakest body part of his. This is really because he is so wide up top, it's just a little off balance when his legs are slightly narrow. If he had bigger legs, I can see a serious argument for him winning the pose, but right now, Michael's legs blow Fabio's out of the water, and Michael cuts a better outline. I do think Fabio has the best arms. Michael's arms are far from bad, they're just a little flat compared to Fabio's full peaky biceps. Overall, I think Fabio's upper body is terrific. Honestly, maybe a little overdeveloped for classic if that's possible. Personally, I think it is. This is a bigger issue we'll touch on later though. But as of right now, I'll just leave it as, yeah, I do think Fabio's upper body is a little overdeveloped. With that said, this is going to be a little controversial, but I prefer the slight edge in aesthetics and the overall balance Michael brings to the pose. And because of that, I'm going to give him this first pose. When aesthetics aren't the bigger focus of the pose, like in this side chest pose, I think Fabio fares a lot better. Fabio is so developed and so wide shoulder to shoulder, he takes this pose easily. I do think Michael's pose is very good. He's also pretty developed and has more of those bodybuilding qualities than other classic athletes, like Fabio. And like Fabio, those qualities translate well to the side shot. However, I really prefer just about everything on Fabio over Michael. His pecs are thicker and rounder than Michael's, with a similar amount of detail. I suppose the delt is about even, all things considered, but the arm isn't. Fabio wins that easily. Now the side leg is also Fabio's. I think Michael has some gnarly hamstring drop, but Fabio has some good hamstrings too. In fact, Fabio's legs from this angle actually look bigger as a whole slightly. And Fabio is sporting some great striations in the glutes and overall dryness in the leg. Something we can't say for Michael at all, surprisingly. Overall, the side chest is a pose that rewards a thicker and more developed physique, unlike the front double. So for this pose, Fabio wins, tying up the score for now. The back double is an even better pose for Fabio. In fact, I think it's his best pose. Michael's back is good. The entire pose is actually. Fabio just happens to win every single area yet again. Go head to toe. Arms and shoulders, easily Fabio's win. He's beating Michael in condition in the back, and we can see that everywhere, but the arms and shoulders too. He's got much more separation in the delts and feathering in the triceps. The upper back is where Michael fares the best, but again, that extra condition is bringing in more details on Fabio's back. Not to mention his taper and width especially are much better. Going Going down to the lower back, again, no surprise, Fabio's tighter here. I think Michael's condition was better at other shows in the past. Don't get me wrong, he's still one of the most conditioned athletes even with this conditioning, but from the back he falls off a little bit from his normal self. I was going to give the area of the lower and mid back to him because usually he's sporting some diced erectors and jagged detail, but here I only see it very vaguely. Onto the lower body, I do think Michael does manage to tie it up in the glutes, but really only barely. And in the hams, despite Michael having a little bit more mass, he's not flexing them as he should and is leaving detail on the table. Fabio's hams are smaller but are absolutely diced. Fabio just dominates this pose easily from top to bottom. For the abs and thighs, I had to do some shopping around for a proper picture of Fabio. This picture is actually from the show Fabio used to qualify, which is the IFBB Extreme Pro. And in these classic comparisons, I'm going to start including both an actual abs and thigh shot and vacuum shots because most of these competitors do both anyway. Unfortunately though, I actually couldn't find a vacuum shot for Fabio. But really, I think Michael wins this shot handily anyway, but I did want to include Michael's vacuum shot for anyone who was curious. Anyway, like I said, Michael is winning this shot pretty easily. Fabio's abs are quite good. I would rather see a head-on shot here, especially for classic athletes, but the shredded obliques are a nice detail to highlight. But Fabio completely falls off in the lower body. We saw this a little in the front double, his legs just need to come up. They don't have the sweep and surprisingly aren't showing that much detail and separation, at least compared to how much he's bringing in those cheese grater obliques. Michael has insane quads on the other hand. He's got great sweep and overall development and is extremely separated. His abs can't be directly compared to Fabio because Fabio is tilting to the side, but Michael's abs are more than good enough. He's throughout the midsection and is plenty symmetrical, plus with a dominant win in the lower body, there's really no way he was going to lose this one. And finally, everyone's favorite nothing burger mandatory, the favorite classic pose. I add this disclaimer to every comparison I do with classic athletes, and this one will be no different. This pose is way too subjective to compare properly, simple as that. I pick a winner technically, but I don't put too much stock into this mandatory. With that said, here's what we got. We've got a bit of apples to apples surprisingly, with both gentlemen hitting the 3/4 back pose, and then a little bit of personalization with Fabio hitting a front lat spread and Michael hitting a one arm bicep pose. So both guys hit the twisting back pose in the comparison rounds at their respective shows for the favorite classic pose of choice. And since we can actually compare two of the same poses for once, I will say I like Fabio's a little more. It mainly comes down to execution. I don't like how Michael is squatting down in a sort of split squat stance. I also think he needs to twist a little more at the waist so we can see more of his back. Fabio's leg stance is a bit neater, it fits the pose better, and with his better back and great arms and shoulders, I think he wins this head to toe. But that is just one pose. I included two more, but I'm not exactly going to judge them. I included them to show you guys that both of these gentlemen can pose. Both guys don't just have one generic pose they pull out for the judges for this mandatory. No, actually both guys are pretty good posers. Honestly, even though I did have Fabio slightly ahead in the actual pose, I think both guys are good enough posers that they can pull out a wide variety of poses and still look great. And hey, that's what this mandatory is. It's all about, can an athlete hit unique classic poses and how well can they hit those poses. Both guys have a lot of poses, both guys can hit them well. So honestly, I'm rewarding both guys for actually giving a shit about posing, which unfortunately we can't say about a lot of other athletes even in the classic division. So to round out this comparison, we got a tie in the favorite classic pose. This division is always super subjective, and subjectivity will have to play a major role in this conclusion of this video because we have a tie on our hands. Michael won the front double and the abs and thighs, while Fabio won the rear double and the side chest, with the favorite classic pose again being a tie. What I noticed throughout this comparison was that Michael's aesthetics are a little better, while Fabio had superior development just about everywhere but the legs. And because of that, it really comes down to what you prefer. Fabio is less classic than Michael, but is more developed. And honestly, with Fabio being able to pose, and with him still having great shape, him beating Wesley at his last show, all of these things lead me to choose him to break the tie. I can certainly see an argument for Michael. I'm very torn on this one. Truth be told, I had already written this with Michael as my winner and I was about to record, but then I changed my mind just barely as I ran through those reasons again in my mind. I think the judges are going to like Fabio's brand of classic enough to place him a couple spots into the top 10. They already liked him enough to beat Wesley after all. That's really the main thing I'm going off of since this was a tie. I think the tie could have been broken pretty easily though if you fall on one side of the aisle as to what you prefer versus what I did by trying to play the middle most of this comparison. Like someone could have easily had Fabio on the front double for that insane upper body and gave him the favorite classic pose too. Overall, I think with the precedent that has been set with Fabio so far, I think the judges will give him a slight edge over Michael. Ask me tomorrow though and I'll probably think differently. That's going to do it for me in today's video. Definitely leave me a comment with your thoughts on this comparison. I really want to know how you guys saw this one. Was it as close as I made it out to be? Do you agree with the poll result? results and think Michael should have won. Whatever you think, leave me a comment down below. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button too, and don't forget to subscribe. We are just days away from the Olympia, and I'll be hosting Olympia watch party live streams all Olympia weekend long. So to stay up to date on future videos and to be notified as to when I'm going live for those live streams, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on. With all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.